I'm just leaving my therapist's office, and what we talked about today was significant not only for me, but I think it could be helpful for everybody who's deconstructing a high demand religion like Mormonism. If you're new here, I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two, where I share my escape from the Mormon religion and Mormon trad wife life and how I've rebuilt on the other side. I left the Mormon church 6 years ago at age 44, and I found my faith crisis to be the most challenging thing that I've ever gone through in my entire life. And of course, I coupled that with a divorce at the same time, so I didn't know which way was up or down or sideways or whatever. All of a sudden, the sky was green, the grass was blue, and I felt like I had been living in the Truman Show, where he realizes it's all fake and just walks out that little door into this unknown void, and we don't know what happens to him, but I would imagine it was very chaotic. I've personally found that as I've walked through this faith crisis and religious deconstruction, that my biggest challenge is a complete loss of my identity. Like, I literally felt that the person that I had been had died and had completely disappeared, and I was just this hollow shell who didn't know who I was at all. And I often find myself in my therapist's office having conversations that I feel are very immature, very juvenile, and I'm trying to figure things out in ways that I see my teenage children also trying to figure things out. And as a 50-year-old woman, I'm no more mature or skilled at coping with this loss of identity and redirecting my life than they are. So here's the conversation that I had with my therapist today. As humans, we have very key developmental phases throughout our life. And one of the most crucial developmental phases, when we gain our identities that we will carry with us through most of our lives, is adolescence, teenage years, young adulthood. That pocket of time in all of our lives as humans is when we push up against boundaries and explore. We try on different hairstyles and different friends groups and different foods, and we experiment to find out at the end of the day what's authentic and true, what resonates with us, what are my tastes, what are my passions, what are my values. For any of us who have teenagers and adolescents and young adults in our lives, we know how messy they can be. Teenagers are rough. Kevin and I have 7 kids from the ages of 14 to 27, so we've seen a lot of teenagers up close and personal on a daily basis. But that messy teenage phase is so crucial for people because at the end of it, they come out, hopefully, a happy, whole person who knows who they are. There are unfortunately things that can stunt this developmental process, and one of those is being part of a high-demand religion. 12, 13, 14, 16, 19-year-old Jenny didn't have the opportunity to experiment with hairstyles, with the type of music that I liked, with the type of boys that I wanted to date, with really anything at all, because my personality, my identity was handed to me on a silver platter. Mormonism told me how to think, how to feel, what to eat, what underwear to wear, what type of person to date, what I should be passionate about, what I should not be passionate about. As I dive into my adolescent and teenage and young adult years, I see a girl who is very much just trying to keep the commandments and obey everything that the prophet told me to do. There was absolutely no exploration, and if I ever had the tiniest thought of exploring something, I would immediately blame that on Satan and get back in line into that little teeny box just as quickly as I could. I skipped key developmental phase because of my high demand religion, and so then I found myself as an adult not knowing who I was and not having to know who I was. I was a Mormon wife and mom. And so I did things that a Mormon wife and mom would do, and I thought things that a Mormon wife and mom would think, and I behaved in ways that a Mormon wife and mom was expected to behave, with no wiggle room whatsoever. I was a daughter of my Heavenly Father who loved me, and I loved him, and I was living my life to be virtuous and uphold his values. All the values that the Mormon church had told me to value, and then, unexpectedly, 6 years ago, it would all come crashing down, and I would lose my faith in that Mormon gospel, and that seemed at first really exciting. And then for the first time in my entire bloody life, I saw myself without all of the Mormon personality and identity that had been layered on top of me for so many years. It's almost like an old antique Victorian house that you sand down to get underneath all the layers of paint, and you see the raw wood for the first time in 200 years. And I didn't know who I was. I had never been able to experiment with what I liked and what I thought and how I wanted to behave. And honestly, I have to say, it is the most unsettling thing that a person can go through. The loss of all of your identity and having to form that identity later in life. I have a couple of friends who are immigrants to America from other countries, and they've talked about that same thing, how that back home they were very much one person, and coming to America has stripped them of all of their identity, and they've had to relearn who they are in the context of our culture and our community. I literally immigrated out of the Mormon church to the real world, and it's been challenging. And as somebody who is part of this big, huge ex-Mormon community and also works with people who've left evangelicism and Catholicism, Jehovah's Witness, Seventh-day Adventist, etc., I have found it really interesting that 30 and 40 and 50 and 70-year-olds are so wild. I've chalked it up for a long time to just a midlife crisis to, honestly, it just seemed crazy to me. I didn't understand why I, in so many ways, just act like an adolescent, experimenting with hairstyles and clothing styles and boyfriends and hobbies and so many things. Like, it's the first time in my life that I ever have, but it's because it is the first time in my life that I have ever been able to experiment with who I am and what I like. Because I spent 44 years as part of a high-demand religion that handed me that Mormon personality on a silver platter, and it stunted my development so much that it wasn't until I was a 44-year-old woman that I was able to begin to form who I am. The amazing Britney Hartley, on one of her YouTubes here recently, talked about something that really shook me. And if I can find that video, I'll put it in the link. Also, her book, No Nonsense Spirituality, which I'll drop in the description, has been so foundational in me being happy after my faith transition. She said that people, when they leave religion, often feel like they have an all-new personality that they never had before, and they often feel like they go to just the polar opposite of who they were in religion. And they wonder, which one was my true personality, the religious personality or the person over here? Brittany puts it so much better than me, so I'll try to find this video for you. And what she said was that religions, especially the high-demand religions, tend to put a mask on us. They give us a fake personality. And who we are authentically was always there all along, but it takes a little bit of unpeeling before that person starts to shine again. So when we finally drop the masks and the fakeness and all of the layers that were painted on us after religion, we start to find our core self, and looking back, we may see, this is who I was in early childhood. These are things that I was passionate about all along, but as I developed, the religion printed itself on top of me, and I didn't know that this person still existed. So I am 6 years out from leaving Mormonism, and I feel like I've maybe matured finally to like young adult faith. So if you are going through a faith crisis, buckle up and realize that you're probably going to regress a little bit back to whatever in your adolescence, teenage years, and young adulthood didn't get developed, and that experimentation, that identity building that you missed out on because your church put their identity over the top of you. And I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways was, don't jump into a new identity that you think you're supposed to have. Go through that process of experimenting and embrace the person that you organically, naturally, authentically are. In a lot of ways, I feel like it's been kind of a treasure hunt that I've been digging for the girl that was buried inside of me all along. And sometimes I'm surprised at what I find. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Please tell me if you've experienced this yourself. Have a great day, guys.